Welcome to the Health Headliner podcast by Tudu Digital. Our content is informational only and not medical advice. Please consult your provider. Now, let's dive into today's headlines.
It's amazing how something like when you decide to eat or not could impact something like your sex drive.
Yeah.
It's not something you typically think about, right? But we're diving deep today into some research where scientists were exploring the effects of intermittent fasting in male mice and stumbled on this kind of wild effect on their libido.
This was a study that was published in Cell Metabolism. And, it's funny because the researchers didn't actually start out looking at that.
Right.
They were interested in kind of the broader health effects of fasting.
Oh, okay.
In terms of the next generation.
Well, so like the offspring.
Yeah, the offspring. Yeah, the offspring.
Okay.
But, they found something that was really kind of surprising. And they ended up kind of changing gears a little bit to focus on what they found, which was that these older male mice who were on this intermittent fasting regimen were having like a huge number of offspring.
Okay, so just to be clear for the listener, the scientists weren't like focusing on libido or sexual desire or anything like that to start.
No, not at all. It was really about, what are the effects of, periods of food restriction on the offspring.
Okay.
And they noticed this like really significant increase in pups being produced by these older fathers, and it was like statistically significant.
Yeah.
And they're like, whoa, wait a minute.
Yeah, of course.
We got to look at this.
Yeah, you would think, okay, well, maybe the fasting is somehow, rejuvenating their reproductive systems or something.
Yeah, you would think like, oh, maybe their testes are, getting better.
Right, or more testosterone.
The sperm quality is improving or their testosterone's going up.
Right.
But when they actually like really carefully looked at all of that stuff, they didn't find any evidence of that.
Really?
In fact, there were some, aspects, like, for example, the weight of the testes actually decreased.
So, okay, so then begs the question for the listener, what's going on here if it's not like a physical thing?
Exactly.
What is making them have all these extra babies?
Well, the key observation was behavioral.
Okay.
And what they noticed was that the male mice that were on this intermittent fasting regimen were engaging in significantly more sexual contact with the female mice.
Okay, so they were mating more often.
Way more often compared to the control group.
Got it.
So it's basically like,
if you're saying,
maybe they were having some physical limitations due to age, but they were just making up for it by being way more,
enthusiastic.
Enthusiastic. That's a good word. Yeah.
Tell me more about the fasting schedule. Like, what did that actually look like?
So, it wasn't just, skipping breakfast. It was a really structured 24-hour cycle.
Okay.
So for 24 hours, the male mice had unlimited access to food and water.
Okay.
And then the next 24 hours, they only had access to water.
Okay. So a full day of fasting.
Yeah, on a full day off.
Got it.
And they did this like consistently for a pretty long time.
Yeah.
So 22 months for the older group.
Oh, wow.
6 months for a younger group.
And for the listener to know, were these males like housed with females this whole time?
No, so that's important. They weren't.
Okay.
They were only introduced for like, specific periods of time.
Gotcha.
For mating.
Okay, so the males are kind of kept separate.
Right.
And then only kind of introduced to see what would happen.
Right.
Okay, so was this like an immediate effect, or did it take a while?
It's a good question. It actually took a while.
Okay.
So in the younger mice, they started to see the increase in mating behavior after about 6 months on the diet.
Right.
The older mice, it was, very clear, but they've been on it for 22 months.
Right.
What's really interesting is that shorter periods of fasting, like just a couple of weeks, didn't really do anything in either group. No. And in fact, there was a 6-week trial with the older mice where they actually kind of suggested there might be some negative effects.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So it seems like there was like a sweet spot, in terms of the duration.
So consistency was really key.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, now the study mentions this neurotransmitter serotonin.
Yeah.
And we hear about that a lot with like mood and stuff, right?
Yeah, mood, sleep, all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, what's the connection between that and sex drive?
So serotonin's a really interesting one.
Yeah.
It's one of these neurotransmitters or chemical messengers in the brain.
Okay.
And it's involved in a lot of different functions.
Yeah.
But generally it's associated with inhibiting sexual behavior.
Oh, okay. So almost like putting the brakes on.
Yeah, like a natural brake on desire.
So what were they seeing these like, super active fasting mice?
Okay, so this is what's really interesting.
Yeah.
They found that in the fasting mice that were showing this increased sexual activity, their serotonin levels in the brain were unusually low.
So like the brake was kind of off.
Yeah, it was like someone was like easing off the brake.
Okay, so then how does the fasting kind of lead to that lower serotonin?
Well, to make serotonin, your brain needs this amino acid called tryptophan.
Okay.
And the thing about tryptophan is we can't make it ourselves.
Okay.
We have to get it from our diet.
Okay, got it.
And so
So were the fasting mice getting less tryptophan then?
that's exactly it.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so they found that overall, the mice that were on this intermittent fasting regimen were eating about 15% fewer calories than the control group.
All right.
And they were also, getting a similar reduction in their tryptophan intake.
Okay.
So they basically hypothesized that because they were eating less and getting less tryptophan.
Yeah.
It was leading to less serotonin in the brain.
Makes sense. Okay.
Yeah. But one thing that one of the researchers, Professor Yuzu, pointed out is it's not clear yet whether this is like specific to this 24-hour on 24-hour off schedule.
Right.
Or if you would see it with like any type of calorie restriction that would reduce tryptophan.
So it could be just that they're eating less.
Right.
Not necessarily this particular schedule.
Right, exactly.
Oh, okay.
So that's something that they still need to figure out.
So this is all really interesting, but how does this apply to humans?
Yeah, so the researchers point out that serotonin is also involved in sexual behavior in humans.
Okay.
And
you mentioned SSRIs earlier.
Yes, exactly.
How does that kind of play into this?
So, SSRIs, these selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, are antidepressants which increase serotonin in the brain.
Okay.
And it's actually pretty common that people who take SSRIs experience like a decrease in their libido.
Oh, interesting.
Or sexual desire. So that kind of, supports this idea that lower serotonin might actually increase sexual desire.
So could intermittent fasting then be like a way to increase libido in humans?
That's what the researchers are suggesting.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, but I mean, obviously we can't just assume that
Absolutely, no.
what happens in mice is going to translate perfectly to people, right?
No, this was just one study.
Yeah.
And, in male mice.
Right. In a specific kind of mice.
In a specific strain, yes. Yeah. We don't know if it would apply to humans.
Yeah.
We don't even know if it would apply to female mice.
Right.
And, this very specific 24-hour on 24-hour off fasting regimen may not be the only way
of course.
to get this effect.
Right.
Maybe there are other forms of intermittent fasting.
Wow.
Like time-restricted eating.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just,
general calorie restriction.
reducing your overall calorie.
Yeah.
They don't know yet.
Okay.
So there's a lot more research to be done.
What were some other limitations that they pointed out in the study?
Yeah. So, we talked about how it was just one particular strain of mice.
Yeah.
They also, haven't figured out exactly how long it takes for this effect to really show up in mice.
Okay.
And whether it matters when you start.
Gotcha.
And also, they couldn't completely rule out that there were, other behavioral changes going on in these fasting mice.
Okay.
Like maybe they were more social.
Oh, interesting.
Or something.
Okay.
And that could have contributed to the increased mating.
So it might not have been just the diet itself?
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so a lot more to look at.
Yeah, definitely.
What did the scientists have to say about kind of where they go from here?
Well, they definitely acknowledged, all these limitations.
Yeah.
And, Professor Zhu specifically said that it takes some time. And he said somewhere between, 6 weeks and 6 months, kind of the minimum.
Gotcha.
And he also said that, they still need to figure out if it's just about the calorie restriction or the tryptophan or if there's something special about this 24-hour cycle.
Okay.
And Dr. Endiger, who is the lead author, he thinks that there's like huge potential for using this therapeutically.
Okay.
But he agrees that they need to do studies in humans to really figure out what's going on.
This has been a really cool deep dive. I mean,
yeah, it's wild.
It's fascinating to me that something like when you eat could have this kind of impact on,
Yeah, our biology is so complex.
Yeah, it really
It's all interconnected.
So where do we kind of go from here with this information?
Well, I think this research really highlights for us,
Yeah.
just how connected everything is.
Yeah.
Like what we eat, how our brains work, and even our desires.
Yeah.
And, it might be a way to address things like low libido.
Yeah. So that's not typically what you think about when you're thinking about, what to eat or not eat.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's definitely a new way of thinking about things.
Yeah. So for the listener out there, what are your thoughts? I mean, given what we've talked about today, do you think it makes sense to explore this further with dietary changes?
Yeah. What do you think are some of the ethical or practical considerations?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's a really good point to make that we have to be careful.
Yeah.
Because, people could start developing unhealthy eating patterns if they try to do this without really understanding what they're doing.
Or without any guidance.
Yeah, or guidance, exactly.
And it's also important to remember, right, that libido is a complex thing.
Yeah, definitely.
It's not just
biological. There's psychological, emotional components, too.
So it might not be a quick fix.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
It's not a magic bullet.
So for our listeners who want to learn more about this particular study, where can they go?
So the original research paper was published in Cell Metabolism.
Okay.
And we'll make sure to include a link to that in the show notes.
Perfect.
So you can check that out.
Awesome.
And, I would encourage you to stay tuned.
Yeah.
There's probably going to be a lot more research on this.
Yeah, this is just the beginning, it sounds like.
Yeah, it's just the beginning.
It's really wild that something like, when you eat or how often you eat could have such a big effect.
I know, it really makes you think.
Yeah. And we'll see what else they find.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for tuning in to the Health Headliner podcast by To Digital. Like and subscribe for more health news and breakthroughs. Stay healthy and informed. See you next time.